panel with us, and on a topic that is becoming incredibly important globally, but also in the different regions. I just wanted to introduce, although none of our excellencies require introduction, but I will still try and make an attempt. So I'd like to introduce His Excellency Gouveia, Governor of the Banco de Mozambique, Governor Kone from Bissau, representing 8 countries in Africa, for some who may not be aware. We have His Excellency Nepal, from Governor of the Central Bank of Nepal, Nepal Rashtra Bank. And we have His Excellency Vasconcelos, Banco de Central, Governor for the Banco de Central de Timor-Leste. I am at a disadvantage, unfortunately, because the only language I can speak is English and Bangla. None of the panel members know Bangla, but hopefully English might be possible, although I've been pre-warned by His Excellencies that I have to attempt to either speak French, for which my response was, "Je ne parle pas français." Unfortunately, I know very little of Portuguese and very little of Nepal as well, so I do apologize to our governors. So the subject of the conversation is really about mobile and digital remittances and how we can make that transition in each of the countries, and there are very important policy and regulatory drivers that will help us get there, but there are also inhibitors that's stopping the process towards that end goal. But before I start, I just want to have a little quiz, if I may. And I want to rattle off a few countries, and I'd like you to try and maybe guess what these countries have in relation to remittances. So Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Kenya, Guatemala, Mozambique, Tanzania, Ghana, Nepal, New Zealand. So I just want to kind of open it up. What does all these countries have to do with remittances? Well, maybe people won't say it, but the combined GDP of all of these countries is equal to the total volume of remittances that's flowing in the world. That's about $500 billion. And that's equivalent to the biggest economy in Africa, Nigeria, which has $520 billion GDP. So the power of remittances is quite remarkable. And particularly in relation to certain countries, they're very, very important. It's also important as an on-ramp to potentially financial inclusion as well. In Africa, I think the total flow is about $40 billion in Africa. In Latin America, it's about $60 billion. And in Asia, it's approximately $260 billion and growing. Now, the big concern has been about informality. And in some cases, there are as many as 50% of the remittances are happening through informal channels. And that, of course, has major lost opportunities nationally in terms of foreign exchange, in terms of the ability of nations to translate these into financing for development, particularly in the post-SDG period, where we're really looking at alternative financial flows for development. And it also undermines the on-ramp to financial inclusion, as people cannot get access to a whole range of other financial services. Now, what was very interesting from Madame Mama Gracia, as I think everyone calls her, is that there is a major gender dimension to the informality as well. More women are beginning to now migrate, and they're sending money back. And for the first time, for the women who stay within the countries and receive, many of them for the first time become heads of households, and they have to make decisions about how they will spend those incoming money coming in. And therefore, the opportunities for us to offer different financial services becomes very important. So the big discussion around those big concerns of informality has been primarily about costs. But more recently, we're beginning to realize that there is an issue about convenience, and that's one of the reasons many people go to informal channels. And there's also increasing insight and better insight about consumer experience. In other words, in a lot of places, we don't have enough brand options, or people just don't have sufficient options in terms of dealing with the money when they are received. So all of this discussion is now taking place in the context of sort of new players coming into the market. So you've got Zoom, Remitly, BitSpark, Beam, the collaboration between Vodafone, M-Pesa, and MTN Mobile Money. So lots of new approaches that are coming along in remittances that just didn't exist maybe about 5-6 years ago. And they're offering very different solutions around the remittance market. So the models are evolving, and it's evolving from cash to internet banking. Internet banking is now about 5% of the market only. Mobile wallets, digital payments using mobile money, which is probably about 2% of the overall transfers. And then more recently around cryptocurrency. So I suppose the purpose of this discussion is how policymakers and regulators are dealing with this changing landscape. And what are the kind of concerns they have, and how are they helping to balance the twin objectives that regulators and policymakers have of, first of all, growing the market and helping the market to develop, but also to ensure stability of the financial system. And that's always the kind of major concern that regulators are concerned about. So that's why I think this panel is such a powerful panel, because our excellencies are thinking about this every single day, this twin objective of market development and financial stability. So, so I'd just like to maybe start with a simple question at the beginning. So maybe, Your Excellency Gobe, since we are in your country, maybe the first question is, why is remittance important for your country and your people?
Muito obrigado e bom dia a todos. Eu considero a pergunta pertinente e vou responder também de forma muito simples, como simples foi a pergunta. Moçambique, pela sua localização geográfica, está ao lado de um país economicamente poderoso e que explora minas de diversa dimensão e também minérios diversos. E já há muitas décadas que Moçambique tem estado a prestar o seu serviço através dos seus cidadãos nas minas da África do Sul. E daí decorre, obviamente, a necessidade de transferência das contrapartidas deste serviço prestado nas minas da África do Sul. São mais de 40 mil moçambicanos trabalhando nas minas formais, mas muitos mais moçambicanos estão envolvidos em atividades na África do Sul, nas plantações, etc., etc. Em relação às minas, há que diferenciar aquelas em que estão reguladas através de contratos intergovernamentais que impõem que 60% dos salários dos mineiros seja retido e só o mineiro volta a beneficiar desses 60% quando regressa ao país. Portanto, são transferências diferidas. Mas sobram 40% que estão ao livre, portanto, à discrição do próprio mineiro e pode utilizar na África do Sul, mas também pode fazer a remessa para o país. Portanto, a localização do país impõe que haja, de facto, uma ponderação muito boa em relação às remessas transfronteiriças. O que acontece neste momento é que os 40% são transferidos de forma variada, utilizando canais formais, mas, e sobretudo, canais informais. Utilizam amigos, utilizam familiares que estão na África do Sul e mandam os dinheiros para Moçambique. Há aqui aspectos também que acabou de referir na sua apresentação inicial, que têm a ver com os custos dessas operações. As operações que ocorrem através de canais oficiais, transferências bancárias ou utilização dos canais que nós conhecemos como Western Union, MoneyGram, etc., etc., verificamos que os custos, as comissões que são cobradas são elevadíssimas. Então, fazendo uma média de transferir cerca de $200 da África do Sul, o equivalente a $200 da África do Sul para Moçambique, chega-se a pagar em redor dos 36 a 38 dólares. Portanto, são custos elevadíssimos de transferência. Mas também temos uma relação histórica com outro país, que é Portugal. Portanto, África do Sul e Portugal são as fontes de remessa para Moçambique e também os destinos de envio de alguns recursos moçambicanos para fora. Por isso, considero pertinente este tópico para ver quais são, de facto, os meios mais adequados para incrementarmos as receitas de imigrantes para Moçambique, que neste momento, nas estatísticas oficiais, contabilizamos na balança de pagamentos cerca de 218 milhões de dólares ano, ou seja, 1,4% do nosso produto interno bruto. Portanto, são valores significativos, mas sabemos que, e também fazendo uso daquilo que se referiu, de que há estudos que mostram que aquilo que vai por via informal é muito mais do que aquilo que vem via oficial. Podemos estimar que os 218 milhões de dólares que nós recebemos anualmente talvez correspondam a transações efetivas na ordem dos 450 a 500 milhões de dólares. É daí que reputo de importante este debate que estamos a ter. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I just want to turn to Your Excellency Kone. Now, you represent 8 countries. It's a very interesting arena where there's lots of remittances that are taking place. I mean, Governor Gove just mentioned, $400 to $500 million, which is probably equivalent to 2.5 to 3% of the GDP of Mozambique. How does that relate to what's happening in the Bissau region?
Merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français, comme je vous avais promis. Bonjour à tout le monde. Je voudrais dire que la BCEAO est la banque centrale de 8 pays, dont la Guinée-Bissau. Mais ce n'est pas seulement la Guinée-Bissau. Donc, il y a 8 pays. C'est le Bénin, le Burkina, la Côte d'Ivoire, la Guinée-Bissau, le Mali, le Niger, le Sénégal et le Togo. Donc, c'est les 8 pays. Alors, à la suite du gouverneur Gove, je voulais dire que dans ces 8 pays, il y en a qui ont une tradition de diaspora depuis très longtemps et de façon très importante. Si je regarde les chiffres ces derniers temps, je me rends compte que le montant total des transferts des migrants pour les 8 pays avoisine 4 milliards de dollars en 2014. C'est quand même un chiffre important parce que ça fait environ 4% du PIB global des 8 pays. Et pour certains des pays, particulièrement où la diaspora est forte, ce taux monte jusqu'à 7-8% du PIB. Donc, ça veut dire que c'est quelque chose d'important. Alors, quel est le contenu? Le contenu, il y a 2 volets. D'abord, un volet social qui est important. Parce que ces transferts des migrants ont un impact social très important parce que c'est des aides aux familles qui sont restées dans les pays. Et ces aides sont multiformes. Ça peut être pour la scolarisation, ça peut être pour l'éducation, ça peut être pour les soins médicaux, autant d'éléments qui socialement sont importants. Le deuxième volet, c'est l'investissement. Beaucoup de ces personnes dans la diaspora, compte tenu de ce qu'ils gardent un lien avec les pays, font des investissements dans l'immobilier, dans certains secteurs porteurs, parce que c'est une façon pour eux de se maintenir et surtout de préparer aussi, sait-on jamais, leur retour. Donc, voilà la situation dans les pays de l'UMOA. Donc, l'importance n'est plus à souligner. Et bien sûr, en tant que banquier central, je ne peux pas ignorer que ça a un impact important sur la balance des paiements des pays et surtout aussi sur les réserves de change de la Banque centrale. C'est important. Voilà ce que je peux dire pour commencer. C'est important et c'est pour ça que nous attachons la plus grande importance à ces transferts. Merci.
Thank you, Governor. I'd like to turn to His Excellency Nepal. I know that in Nepal you've just completed the Making Access Possible survey, diagnostic, which has now given you lots of data around remittances and people's financial behavior. And I think, so could you tell us a little bit about how important remittances is to the economy and people of Nepal? And what are your kind of major concerns? I think we've heard about foreign exchange, we've heard about social policy. What is it for Nepal?
Thank you, Faisal. Good afternoon, good morning. Shall I say in Nepal?
I don't know whether translators extend to Nepali.
Okay. Look, it's very important for us that 30% of GDP, it says that it comes from remittance. Since 20 years, in 1995, our poverty level was 41%. Now it came down to 25% because of remittance. There was a study from IMF that IMF has conducted one study for Nepal. That study told it is almost 7% of poverty reduction has come through the remittance. In our country, 57% household, they receive remittance. And our trade deficit is very huge. It is almost 10-fold high what we export outside. We import much from India and third world. That trade deficit, for that trade deficit, remittance is very important for us. It is the major source of foreign reserves. And it has increased the living standard of the Nepali people. So we don't have good export, the source of foreign currency, it comes from remittance. If remittance is stopped, there will be big disasters in the economy. So when I think about this mobile banking and money, one thing is very wondering to me. I think it is a question to you all also. We receive money through the mobile banking. We have a very good mobile banking in internal part of country. But apart from that, we receive money from abroad. The abroad, they keep the agent. The agent has another agent in the country. And the person who work in abroad, and he give money, suppose $100. That $100 equivalent to 10,000 Nepali rupees. Somebody will cash that 10,000 Nepali rupees in the remote village of Nepal. And because of this, we are wondering if we introduce this foreign currency reserve will come down. During these few years, when we started introducing mobile money, then this dollar reserve has come down. Because the people, those who use the agent and those who are these remittance holders, they stay, for an example, they stay in Gulf country, they collect that $100 like from all Nepali people, and that $100 with millions of dollars, they started through hundi from China. They smoked the gold through Nepal to India. So it is a bit different. So it is not easy I think in my country. If we start doing this, we have to go through different phases also. First, mobile money accounting system should be very clear, and the information system must be very clear. If we do simply, it is possible in one currency system, but we have no one currency system. We have to buy Indian currency, giving dollar to India to fulfill our trade deficit. We have to import goods from third country through dollar. The major source of dollar is remittance. If we use the mobile, this networking, at present what we are losing dollar, it's very surprising for you all. Because the people, the agent, what they do, I told you earlier, what they do, they get dollar, but they pay Nepali currency through their agent in Nepal. And dollar remain abroad. It won't come to Nepal. This is happening. So how can you track all these things? It has become a serious problem because in coming future that we are a bit late to introduce this, the electronic banking systems, but we have to introduce it. It is a measure that threat to us, but on the other side, what should be the regulation for it? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency. I think it's an interesting take. It would be good to get other people's views about the impact of, or how do we make sure that as we move towards the digital space, we can still maintain our foreign exchange reserves, the benefits of remittances. I just want to, we'll come back to this again because I think it's a very important point, but I'd just like to turn to Your Excellency Vasconcelos. Just two issues. One is we've recently been seeing the AML and CFT has led to certain number of banks simply pulling out of the remittance business because the margins have gone down. They feel that it's too risky, or the full push towards the G20 to reduce costs isn't making for the banks an attractive remittance and attractive business proposition. That is potentially creating the mobile MTOs, their internal processing costs are going up as well. So inadvertently, the cost might go up again. Now, so that may drive down even further informality in remittance markets. So I just wanted to just ask you, Your Excellency, what sort of measures are you taking to, in relation to AML and CFT, that the potential for greater informality as a result is avoided?
Good morning, everyone. Well, in fact, in Timor-Leste, the process started from the IML-CFT issue. So in 2011, Timor-Leste, we went through the mutual evaluation exercises. And in fact, one of the weakest point that's spotted in the report was the non-compliance with the recommendations related to wire transfer, money transfer services. So in fact, we start the process from there. The reason why initially we did not focus, the central bank, we did not focus on the remittance issue because at the initial stage, we have these international money transfer providers like Western Union, MoneyGram. So in fact, we rely on their internal process. They are internationally operated institutions. So we did not allocate resources on how to look at this sector. Then when the mutual evaluation process started, then it identified the weaknesses. So we start the process of reviewing the entire industry, the remittance industry. And we collect information, try to understand how the system, but in fact, it turned out to be that we have over 10 informal remitters that operate in Timor-Leste at that time. And by 2012, we introduced an instruction that imposing all money transfer operators are required to be registered at the central bank. And from that, the requirement that we impose, in fact, it's related to the customer due diligence process, basically basic customer identification process. For instance, in the requirement that we introduce, customer that they do transaction with amount below $500, for instance, they are not required to obtain a copy of the ID information. But those that do the transaction above the threshold, the $500, are required to provide copy of the ID, declare the source of funds, the purpose of the transaction. So basically, we start deal with the MTOs formally. Of course, in the instruction or regulation that we issued, it contained also licensing procedures, also customer protection. Basically, it related to the claim handling and disclosure requirements. So, in fact, of course, now the situation is that even one or two banks that we have still denying access to those MTOs, but at least the central bank, we try our efforts. We try to bring confidence into the system. Because we cannot afford, in a small system such as the one that Timor-Leste we have, each financial institution, they do not give access to each other. And this is very costly in terms of how we manage the system. Just a background information, our banking system, we only have 4 banks. 3 are branches of international banks. And from the 4, in fact, 3 also are state-owned bank. So reputation, the banking system, the financial system reputation is very, very important for us. So going back to your question, in fact, we started with the IML CFT process. Now we start seeing that more international players are expressing interest. Last month, one of the payment system providers from our neighbor country, they already signed an MOU with a local bank to introduce sort of a cross-border transfer system, an electronic platform that will allow, at the first stage, will allow transfer from Timor-Leste to outside, but then in the next stage will allow also a incoming transfer to Timor-Leste and also permit the mobile platform to be included.
Good. Thank you very much. So I just want to pick up on two of those issues, particularly with first, Your Excellency Kone. I mean, obviously a very large amount of money is flowing through within the 8 countries. So I suppose the first question is, have you seen, what has been your experience of the impact of AML CFT on the remittance market between the formality and informality? And two, our earlier governor just said that actually that's creating the space for new forms of digital transfers and mobile platforms to come through. And it's probably a good thing if banks or traditional providers may not be as interested as before. But what has been your experience in Bissau, and how have you responded to those changes?
Bien, merci beaucoup. Je voudrais d'abord compléter pour dire qu'en ce qui concerne les transferts informels, compte tenu de ce que dans notre zone, il y a quand même une tradition très ancienne de transfert des migrants, ces transferts informels ne représentent que 17%. Donc c'est beaucoup moins que, par exemple, dans la moyenne des pays qu'on connaît. Quels sont les canaux qui sont utilisés? En règle générale, c'est les structures de transfert rapide d'argent. Monnaie Western Union, MoneyGram, etc. etc. Très peu par le système bancaire, parce que justement, par le système bancaire, certaines banques de la zone se sont installées à l'extérieur et ont pu, par ce canal, mobiliser quelques transferts qui sont faits par les migrants, mais ce n'est pas les plus importants. Alors, ce que je dois, bien sûr, ces transferts qui sont faits par ces organismes respectent notamment les règles qui sont édictées, les règles d'identification, les règles de montant, qui permettent justement de traquer les transferts illicites et le blanchiment. Alors, il y a une spécificité quand même qu'il faut que je note, c'est que les transferts des migrants, bien sûr, il y a une partie qui vient de l'extérieur. Je crois que dans notre zone, c'est à peu près 57% venant de l'Europe. Mais quand même, au niveau de l'Afrique, il y a à peu près une vingtaine de pourcents. Et même dans les pays de l'UMOA, il y a des ressortissants qui sont installés dans d'autres pays et qui font des transferts dans leur pays. Ça aussi, ça représente quelque chose de l'ordre de 13 à 14%. Et c'est par cette voie-là qu'en règle générale, la plateforme électronique est beaucoup utilisée. Pour la simple raison que ces 8 pays ont la même monnaie, il n'y a pas de contrôle de change. Donc, il est possible d'un pays à faire des transferts dans d'autres pays, surtout que les opérateurs, notamment de téléphonie mobile, qui font ces opérations, sont installés pour la plupart dans beaucoup de pays, sinon dans l'ensemble des pays. Donc ça facilite un peu ces opérations. Alors, le contrôle qui est fait est un contrôle qui est normal au niveau de tous les pays, c'est-à-dire que tous ces transferts doivent, à partir d'un certain moment, par rapport aux structures que nous avons mises en place, faire des déclarations de soupçons dès lors que le montant, dès lors que l'initiateur apparaisse comme faisant des opérations qui ne sont pas très claires et très licites. Donc, c'est la formule traditionnelle entre les pays, mais c'est la formule traditionnelle aussi au niveau des transferts rapides et des opérateurs qui officient dans ce domaine. Voilà ce que je peux dire, mais je reviendrai par la suite sur un certain nombre d'aspects que nous avons nous-mêmes favorisés et qui font l'objet d'un contrôle un peu spécifique. Merci.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Excellency Gowe, I mean, just on the AML CFT, what has been your experience of the impact on providers and so the formality, informality of remittances from Mozambique and to Mozambique?
Muito obrigado. Neste momento, utilizamos as remessas são feitas, como disse, pela via formal, em que são os bancos ou então essas instituições de transferência de dinheiro. No nosso país, para melhor verificação da questão do branqueamento de capitais e de combate ao terrorismo, essas instituições de transferência de moedas estão ligadas a uma instituição bancária. Ou seja, há uma base de dados que está sediada num banco. Não operam de forma isolada. Para serem licenciados, tem que dizer qual é o banqueiro a que estão adstritos. Então, a partir de bancos, nós temos toda a informação sobre quem é que fez a remessa, para que é que fez a remessa e para onde é que fez a remessa. Então, a questão de branqueamento de capitais e combate ao terrorismo, entendemos que aquilo que é feito via formal está sob controle. O problema está na parte informal das transferências, que, como vimos, deverão constituir metade das transferências. Aliás, é quase um valor igual àquilo que oficialmente é transacionado. Aí já temos algumas questões que penso que devemos discutir aqui, como é que, por um lado, poderemos promover as MNOs para intermediar essas transferências, mas acautelando-se dos riscos que são atinentes a esse tipo de operadores. Ou seja, o risco de ter-se a certeza de que o princípio de que deve conhecer o cliente está preservado, a questão de que o branqueamento de capitais está preservado. Então, isso é o que nós temos que ver como é que podemos abordar. Na nossa opinião, há questões que deveriam ter uma abordagem regional. Identificados os países de origem e de destino dos recursos, deveria ser possível ter-se alguma harmonização das exigências nesse domínio. Por exemplo, o princípio de conheça o seu cliente. Pode acontecer, e acontece, que há países que são mais liberalizantes. Ou seja, define um montante máximo, abaixo do qual não se exige a apresentação de uma justificação sobre os aspectos de know your customer. Mas, porventura, o país receptor exige que quem receba tenha que justificar de onde é que vem o dinheiro, para que é que serve, para que é recebido o dinheiro, etc, etc. Então, há aspectos que penso que numa abordagem regional poderia mitigar todos os riscos e acautelarmos-nos desses princípios que são nobres de combate ao terrorismo e branqueamento de capitais.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, just to pick up on this issue of mobile network operators. So, as you get the harmonization, as you have new players coming in with new models, including things like cryptocurrency and so on, how are you dealing with those things? Because this is, you're having P2P transfers, they're completely bypassing banks, there isn't a requirement for settlements. What are your thinking around that? What worries you? How do you support it? Cautiously or not cautiously, whatever it might be? How are you managing that process?
Bom, aqui vou falar do que é o ideal e do que é o concreto. No concreto, o que é que nós encontramos? Encontramos perdas grandes porque não temos o controle estatístico do que está a acontecer pela via informal, justamente pela inexistência de mecanismos oficiais para que as remessas sejam feitas. Então parece que o prejuízo é muito elevado do que encontrar uma forma fácil, mas que não ponha em causa as necessárias precauções. Eu estava atento a ouvir o colega de Nepal sobre a questão das reservas que ficam lá fora e depois perde porque utilizam esse sistema de transferências eletrônicas. Eu acho que é uma questão séria, mas se calhar deveríamos ver como é que o agente, ou seja, aquele que recebe instrução pelo telefone para pagar um determinado cidadão no país, como é que se cria a moeda para ele depois pagar ao destinatário final. Em princípio, não deveria haver tanto risco assim, porque o representante desta instituição que está lá fora deveria poder transferir os recursos em moeda estrangeira para o país de destino, porque é com esses recursos em moeda estrangeira que se compra a moeda local que vai ser disponibilizada ao destinatário final. O que é que eu quero dizer? O que eu quero dizer é que aqui deveria, de outra forma, haveria este problema de risco de liquidação, porque recebe instrução por telefone, mas não recebe dinheiro. Como é que depois paga o destinatário final? Portanto, deveria haver como funciona em relação a bancos. Os bancos têm sempre correspondentes. Se alguém quer fazer uma importação de uma mercadoria, é preciso instruir o seu correspondente para que a sua conta seja debitada e seja acreditada a conta do exportador, não é? Aqui nas remessas deveria ser também a mesma coisa. Se alguém quer fazer uma ordem, que no fundo significa importação, deveria haver a possibilidade de quem dá instrução no exterior para que seja feito algum pagamento no país de destino, colocar as divisas correspondentes na conta de quem vai fazer o pagamento. E aí não teria o desperdício de não entrar os recursos. E as reservas do país não são aquelas que estão fisicamente no país, mas aquelas que também estão nas contas dos correspondentes, mas correspondentes de instituições nacionais. Portanto, constituem também reservas do país. Então, no nosso caso, o que nós queremos assegurar, de facto, é que não haja o risco de liquidação. Porque hoje eu dou instruções para que se pague a alguém que está na África do Sul. É uma operação instantânea. É recebida imediatamente na África do Sul, em princípio deveria pagar. Se não existir uma conta que mantém um fundo médio para liquidação, corre-se o risco de se ter a incapacidade ou insolvência da parte de quem vai realizar a operação. Portanto, uma das coisas que nós temos que sentar com os operadores antes de licenciarmos é estudarmos o circuito total dessas operações para certificarmos de que não há o risco de que o sistema possa falir por falta de cautelas necessárias. Ou seja, que aquele que remete observa os requisitos a que nos referimos, mas aquele que recebe também esteja protegido, senão o sistema não vai funcionar. Portanto, é assim como nós vemos. Nós ainda estamos a caminho de licenciar este tipo de operações, achamos que é necessário, mas precisamos de fazer um estudo muito compreensivo para que não falhe. Muito obrigado.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think this raises a very interesting conversation about, I suppose, the speed with which the digitization process is happening, the P2P, the cryptocurrency that's coming along. I mean, there's a lot of conversation saying that actually in 4 or 5 years' time, there may not be a requirement for commercial banks. That people can simply bypass commercial banks to do that. But the message I'm getting is that we need to be able to manage that very well, and it requires a greater conversation. Just one final, I suppose, question to Governor Kone. I mean, you've done both within AFI, but elsewhere you're taking a big lead on the digital financial services work. How do you see that group's work coming along that might inform other countries in terms of how digital financial services can help on the remittance side while protecting stability and so on of all the things that Governor Goe has mentioned?
La traduction n'a pas été très bonne. Je ne suis pas sûr d'avoir bien compris parce que le traducteur a commencé au milieu de la question. Je crois comprendre que vous voulez savoir qu'est-ce que, avec l'AFI, nous pouvons donner comme sensibilisation au niveau des opérations qui sont faites dans ce sens. Est-ce que c'est bien ça? Parce que je n'ai pas bien compris la question qu'il a posée.
Sure. So I suppose the question is that with banks sort of pulling out slowly and slowly from the traditional remittance market as costs come down, the entry of new players with new models using web, using cryptocurrency, those are going to come along. There are some legitimate concerns about how that impacts on stability. How do you see the work that you're leading within West Africa to inform remaining members about how to balance the need for stability with the need for new market players and models to drive down costs, to make things more convenient, and have much better customer experience? How do you balance the two through the work of AFI, but also through the work of BICEL?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Bon, je crois que c'est un travail extrêmement difficile, mais auquel il faut se soumettre. Comme le gouverneur Gové a dit tout à l'heure, la préoccupation, c'est de faire de telle sorte que ces mouvements puissent se faire au moindre coût et le plus rapidement possible. Parce que nous nous rendons compte de l'impact que ça peut avoir sur les économies. D'abord, d'une façon générale, sur le financement des économies, mais aussi sur la stabilité financière. Parce que nous avons besoin de savoir la nature de ces ressources, les circuits utilisés par ces ressources et souvent l'utilisation de ces ressources. Alors, il y a plusieurs mécanismes. Et les mécanismes existants nous permettent actuellement, à partir des bases de données, de pouvoir suivre certaines des opérations. Je ne suis pas sûr que nous les suivons tous et dans toute leur complexité. Mais ce qui est important, c'est de pouvoir suivre au moins la plus grande partie, celle qui peut, à un moment, être facteur de déstabilisation à la fois pour l'économie et même peut-être à la fois par rapport aux règles qui sont en cours, notamment le blanchiment des capitaux. Donc, c'est ce que nous devons faire. Maintenant, ce qui est beaucoup plus important, c'est que lorsque nous avons des mécanismes novateurs, comme par exemple la téléphonie mobile, et qu'il faut faire, et c'est là que vient le rôle de la réglementation, et qu'il faut faire une réglementation qui puisse à la fois permettre de régler le problème du coût, de régler le problème de la rapidité de la transaction. Il faut que nous réglions aussi le problème de la sécurité des mouvements et surtout aussi de la protection des usagers. C'est ce qu'on essaie de faire. Ce n'est pas toujours facile, mais je crois qu'on est obligé de le faire. Alors, on prend des dispositions qui sont plus ou moins évolutives dans le temps, parce que ce n'est pas toujours qu'on arrive à cerner dès le départ l'ensemble de la complexité. Et c'est pour ça aussi qu'il faut que cette réglementation, et c'est ce que nous essayons de faire, il faut qu'elle soit mise à jour au fur et à mesure. Parce qu'au début, il y a certaines opérations qui nous apparaissent comme tout à fait normales, mais qui peuvent renfermer des inconnus. Et chaque fois que c'est possible, il faut adapter la réglementation à l'innovation qui va très vite dans ce domaine. Voilà ce que je peux répondre sur ce point.
Well, thank you very much. Before we open it up to the floor for any particular questions, I'd just like to offer an opportunity to any of the governors. Governor Nepal.
Thank you. Yeah. Governor Govi, that he noted that statistics is a very important part. That we don't have a statistics. So who is going abroad? Who is spending money? Money is coming inside. But the statistics is very important. It will help to check and it will help to identify for the KYC also.
Good. Did you have any final words before we open up to the floor?
Yeah, just to add into the conversation on the new development that probably will bypassing the banking activities. I think this is something that most of us, particularly those from central banks, we have to look at this particular development with careful, because banking sector is in fact a sector that plays very important role in any economy. So how we have to find a balance, or how we have to find innovative approach to accommodate this new development. Just to give one example, in our case, to show that this new development sometimes make supervisory authority, central banks, you feel that you stay behind. We just launched our national payment system strategy December last year, and just by June we realized that in fact we are almost outdated. I mean, we are not up to the development. So this presents a challenge to us, and I think by entering into this new environment, communication with the market participants, I think it's very important, because we have to understand exactly what we are about to enter before we move. I think it's just to add.
Good. No, thank you very much. Let me open this up to the floor. We have maybe for a brief, maybe 3 questions. I can see our colleague from Pakistan. Oh my goodness, lots of lots of hands. Okay, maybe we just take Pakistan, Nepal, a colleague there, colleague there. Maybe we just take the 4 questions and then we could fill that afterwards. Yes, please.
Thank you. A quick question for the regulators. These cross-border transfers and the remittances, you see, are basically simple transfers. And most of these are meant for the consumption purpose. My fear is that if we want to link it with financial inclusion, then unless we package it with investment products, with lending and the borrowing activities, we'll not be able to have that additionality. So how could the regulators, I mean, force to package these remittances with these sort of products to bring in financial inclusion? Thank you.
Okay, so, so what would be the role of regulators in promoting greater additionality on remittances? Okay, then Nepal.
Thank you. As you referred to the study that we have done recently, we have done demand side of financial inclusion study in collaboration with the UNCDF and Binmark Trust. And based on that study, we have revealed that about 40% of the populations are formally served. And if we take into account the cooperatives and other non-bank financial institutions, there are another 21% who are financially served. So this information indicates that still there are about 39 to 40% of population who are informally served. So this is a great challenge of financial inclusion for Nepal, for which we are working together with UNCDF in the days to come. So now, coming back to the subject of an issue that we are here today, 79% of the population, they said that they are using cell phone as a medium of communication. And if we use that mobile devices for remittance purposes, probably we will be trying to attract the non-formal population to the formal systems. And we are trying to do that one through the government policies as well as from the central bank. Even at this stage, in the last budget, the government announced that all the payment system has to channelize through the formal system, through the banking system. Likewise, in our monetary policy, we have addressed that issue, and we are going forward and trying to come forward with regulatory directives, which will try to convert as far as possible to bring the population from informal sector to the formal system. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So, good point that digital financial services allow greater people from informal to become formal. So that's good. Colleague there, yeah. Can you introduce yourself? And I know lots of people know each other, but maybe you could, and then ask the question.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais intervenir également en français. Abel Halima, je suis le directeur de la supervision bancaire de la Banque centrale du Royaume du Maroc. Je voudrais juste un petit peu rappeler que dans le cas du Maroc, nous avons aujourd'hui des transferts qui avoisinent pratiquement les 6 milliards de dollars par an. Mais heureusement, tous ces transferts passent par des canaux formels, puisque nous avons régulé le secteur. Nous avons des établissements de paiement aujourd'hui qui disposent de pratiquement 3000 points de vente. Mais je rejoins les préoccupations du gouverneur, notamment du gouverneur Koné, sur le coût des transferts. Nous avons œuvré pour qu'il n'y ait plus de monopole par rapport à un canal, notamment Western Union et MoneyGram. Nous avons ouvert le marché à la concurrence. Nous avons également encouragé les corridors entre certains pays et le Maroc pour justement diminuer les coûts. Mais n'empêche, on reste globalement dans des coûts qui sont relativement élevés. Et vu l'importance de la masse d'argent qui est transférée chaque année, on peut imaginer ce que ces sociétés prélèvent à la source avant l'envoi. Alors ma question est très simple, que peut faire l'AFI en tant que réseau pour œuvrer pour la baisse des coûts des transferts, étant signalé que la plupart des membres de l'AFI sont des pays récipiendaires de transferts venant de l'étranger. Merci.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Very interesting discussion. My name is Ibrahim Stevens. I'm Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sierra Leone. I'd like to throw in a monetary policy perspective on this discussion, because I think our recent financial history teaches us that we could actually consider this as a monetary policy instrument within different monetary frameworks, within different scope for stimulating demands in the economy. You could actually formalize this process. So central banks should start thinking about actually using remittance as a monetary management tool. So as we did for quantitative easing, quite a few years ago, I did a lot of work on that in the United Kingdom when I was at the Bank of England. But for Africa, it makes common sense. Remittance is an asset class. So if you have scope to stimulate demand, the central bank can actually create money. So what does the central bank need to do? Maybe create a special purpose vehicle that could reduce the tax on remittance so the cost of remittances goes down. It comes through the central bank. I know, private sector may not particularly welcome this, but I want to build reserve in the central bank. So I could, if I have space to stimulate demand, i.e. manage inflation and the exchange rate well, I could, as a central bank, have a special purpose vehicle that could attract remittances, and I can manage monetary policy quite effectively using this. So in a way, it's another tool to our toolkit that we could use as central banks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, fascinating comments. I'm not sure whether we're going to have time to respond to this, but I think I'd like to just maybe frame these in two ways. One is, we've talked about primarily stability, we've talked about security, we've talked about making sure that we have balance. I think the questions that are coming along is, what is the sort of more proactive, positive role of regulators or policymakers in encouraging either the private sector to add greater value products to remittances so there's greater stickiness, so that there's greater, people feel that there's greater usefulness of remittances. But also, what sort of role can regulators play in developing better monetary instruments that support not just for the private sector, but looking at, for instance, securitizing remittance flows and offering bonds and so on that allows to go back into the government in terms of creating foreign exchange reserve. So there's a whole range of things that central banks, governors, policymakers can do. So maybe just one thought for each governor, and then we'll try and close if possible. So perhaps, Governor Gove.
Muito obrigado. Eu acho que não há dúvida nenhuma que qualquer país ganha mais por reduzir o setor informal, fazendo com que os que estão no setor informal passem para o setor formal. Conseguimos melhor estatística, conseguimos criar condições para ajudar este setor e o país ganha também porque, no fundo, não há fugas de capitais. Então, tudo que possa ser feito para que o setor informal seja minimizado e as transações ocorram por via formal é bom para o cidadão e é bom também para o país. Tendo isto como pano de fundo, eu penso que, na verdade, olhando para aquilo que são as estatísticas que já apresentamos, de custos ou comissões cobradas pelos canais atualmente existentes, no nosso caso, na ordem dos 37 a 38 dólares, para transferir cerca de 200 dólares. Olhando para os riscos que existem de que as pessoas utilizam as empresas de transporte para entregar em cash as suas poupanças para serem transportadas para as famílias, com todos esses riscos, e o risco talvez adicional de que não chega a tempo que desejaria que chegasse os fundos aos familiares, porque há sempre uma decalagem de tempo até que a empresa transportadora se organize para sair da África do Sul e vir para Moçambique, depois localizar a família que é beneficiária. Portanto, tendo em conta todos esses aspectos que, para mim, pesam mais negativamente, eu acho que a consideração de que é preciso abrir o mercado e sermos proativos no licenciamento de mais operadores é, de facto, uma abordagem razoável de considerar. porque vamos permitir que os custos de transação certamente baixem, vamos permitir que haja mais eficiência e isso também pode ser seguido ou acompanhado de alguns incentivos de natureza monetária para facilitar a política monetária de que se referiu o nosso amigo. Porque, na verdade, tudo que fica no informal não entra nas estatísticas. E quando se faz as projeções monetárias, não estamos a considerar uma parte significativa de informação que nós não controlamos. Portanto, é possível fazer-se uma combinação de tal forma que os fazedores de política consigam fazer projeções muito mais fiáveis e alinhadas com aquilo que é a realidade. Portanto, eu sou otimista a que haja uma proatividade de concertações a nível regional para acautelarmos daquilo que são as exigências internacionais sobre o conheça o seu cliente, sobre branqueamento de capitais, harmonização desses procedimentos, mas sou otimista que a liberalização, na perspectiva de que admitir mais operadores pode ter vantagens, eu penso que é alguma coisa que devemos defender. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. Governor Kone.
Merci beaucoup. Je crois que je ne vais pas revenir sur ce que le gouverneur Gové a dit et que je partage tout à fait. Je crois qu'au niveau des régulateurs, ce que nous devons faire, c'est d'encourager le plus possible les transferts formels, qui passent par des circuits formels que nous avons la possibilité de contrôler et de suivre. Je crois que c'est dans l'intérêt de tout. Et d'ailleurs, il faut expliquer, et nous le faisons souvent, à ceux qui passent par le circuit informel, qu'ils courent beaucoup de risques. Le risque de ne même pas que l'opération aboutisse, ça c'est un. Et puis le risque aussi que la bancarisation par la suite pose des problèmes parce qu'il y a des déclarations de soupçons à faire. Parce que si vous recevez de façon illicite des fonds et que vous ne pouvez pas gérer ces fonds, que vous êtes obligé de les placer en banque, vous allez devoir donner des explications sur la provenance des fonds, etc. Sans compter qu'il y a d'autres risques. Donc c'est ça que nous faisons. Mais je voulais revenir un peu sur la question qui a été posée initialement, c'est le lien entre l'inclusion financière et justement ces transferts. Je crois que les facettes sont multiples et peut-être qu'on ne les a pas toutes détaillées. Quelqu'un qui reçoit par exemple de l'argent, souvent il est peut-être un intermédiaire où il doit redistribuer cet argent à d'autres familles et souvent dans des endroits assez reculés. Donc obligatoirement il est obligé de passer par le système bancaire. Donc ça les amène à ouvrir des comptes et à avoir accès au système bancaire et au système financier. Ça, c'est la même chose. Alors, je vais un peu plus loin d'ailleurs dans notre zone. On s'est aperçu que les banques ne sont pas dans toutes les régions. Par contre, les structures de microfinance que nous avons développées vont le plus loin possible vers les utilisateurs. Mais ceux-là, dans la nouvelle réglementation que nous avons faite, nous leur avons permis d'être émetteurs de monnaie électronique à leur demande. Ce qui nous permet de mettre en place une réglementation et un suivi qui permet justement, là où les banques ne sont pas, de pouvoir faire ce transfert au niveau des populations les plus reculées et les plus loin possible du système bancaire. Donc voilà le lien qu'il y a entre justement ces transferts qui arrivent et qui peuvent accroître de façon significative l'inclusion financière dans les pays. Donc je voulais vous donner cet exemple-là pour vous dire que c'est possible. Maintenant, en ce qui concerne les banques centrales, je suis tout à fait d'accord avec notre ami. La gestion monétaire est un peu plus complexe et je crois que ce qui nous intéresse ici, c'est de voir finalement qu'est-ce que nous faisons pour que ces transferts-là soient les plus diligents possibles et qu'ils puissent servir non seulement à l'économie, mais aussi aux banques centrales que nous sommes. Voilà ce que je voulais dire. Pour répondre à la question qui est bonne, et qui rejoint ce que le gouverneur Gove a dit, c'est la concertation. Moi, je pense qu'il faut de plus en plus de concertation. C'est dommage, nous n'avons pas beaucoup de temps, mais j'aurais donné des exemples qui montrent que sur le plan régional et sur le plan même, on peut amener à des concertations qui sensibilisent, parce que ce qui n'a pas aujourd'hui, que nous ne développons pas, c'est la sensibilisation des différents acteurs. Parfois, ils ne se connaissent même pas. Parfois, ils ne savent même pas quels sont leurs intérêts. Et je crois que c'est la concertation au fur et à mesure entre les acteurs, entre les régulateurs qui peut permettre de faire avancer les choses. Voilà ce que je voulais dire. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So, optimism, regional consultation, discussion. Excellency Nepal, briefly, before, unless we might have a rebellion on our hands because everyone wants to go to lunch, including ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, of course, we have to bring informal sector to formal sectors. As the student of economics, I see that we have a different level of development. Some are developed, some are least developed, some are developing countries. So the easy flow of money, when you talk about the mobile banking, digitals, means let people get money quickly. That is the major concern, that they can use money for the productive area, for their use. When you see this thing through this new technology, it's very important. I'm thinking about that every day we have the fluctuation in our currency. Reserve, foreign exchanges fluctuate. Sometimes you see the dollar is going up, now it is going up dollar. Recently the China RMB, they sold. They have started increasing dollar reserve. And so many things happen every day. Now, in this situation, the country, those who are least developed, developing, and highly developed, what will be the role at this stage? This is the medium only to make people use their money very quickly in a productive area. Mobile banking, digital, I understand in that way. So this is another challenge that we are facing until and unless we have a single currency in a different region. We can't move perfectly. There is hurdles, definitely. We have to challenge those hurdles also. I think FE can work on it. This is the major challenge that we are facing. Even when there is a dollar exchange, dollar is low price, the people hold money there, the remittance countries. They don't send it to their country. This is the reality. When it is high, they send to their country. So this fluctuation, how do you stop this? It has to make more cautious. The central bank regulator also very cautiously looking at it. Through this, I earlier just gave example of my country. The same thing is happening to other countries also. Still, 40% population, they are away, that they are using informal channel. That is hundi. Hundi, they get money, the people they involve in hundi, they buy gold, and they do smuggling through that gold. How do we stop it? It is another challenging for this digital world. So that what my concern is here, it is very important that we have to bring informal sector to the formal financial system. It will help. But we have to start talking about the one currency also. That is major one currency. That for one currency, the development level, so at least it should be, there must be the similarity in the development level. Development status of the country must be similar for one currency. Look, we in South Asia, we are not able for one currency. Last time that we talked about one currency, this is the big challenge for us. Yeah. And allowing the non-bank players to involve in the banking business, that which we are doing it. And financial literacy is another major part that we started that financial policy in Nepal.
Good.
I think all of we must go through the financial literacy that the country, the people, they understand what is the financial, how does it work, how money work,
Very useful.
how it moves. It is very important to understand for the people of the country, each country.
Right.
So regulatory support to the bank and this financial non-banking player is must to improve their technology and to improve to understand the private sectors. There must be we must develop the synergy in between private sector and the regulatory body that we can move together in this economic world.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Finally, Your Excellency, and then we'll wrap up.
I'll be very quick. I think we have been seeing over the past 2 years or so, with very interesting, this new development. And I think these very powerful instruments that we have been talking about, one is the mobile-enabled platform. This is something that the central bank, we should put a lot of resources to look at this, work with the stakeholders to make sure that how we transform this into, to fill the gaps that our system has, for instance. This is very important. One of the questions that asked about price, I think we have seen in our experience that by introducing the market participants, if they introduce new products, this will help bring down the cost. One of the examples we have faced, for instance, from one of our workers in the UK, transfer £1,000, and it ended up into his bank account in Timor just about 750. So it costs a lot. Now, all the transactions become very efficient, and also the cost is also quite cheap now. So I think allow and work with market participants is very, very important to introduce innovative products. This will be with add value to our system.
Great. Thank you very much, Governors. I'm being ushered to say we should close up. I think the Governors I don't think it requires a summary because your voices are very clear. I think there are just 3 trends that I'm just picking up, which from a person who's been kind of having these discussions around remittances, that's new, in my view. One is that a lot of the conversation has been dominated for a long time around transparency, around issues of security. But I think there is a larger conversation around the macroeconomic instruments, the macroeconomic policy role that regulators play. And that's a new space that this discussion needs to come into, particularly given the fact that remittances contribute such a large part to the economies of most of our countries. And I think the second is the idea of regional harmonization, how regionalization might support that. I don't know after Greece whether a single currency is particularly useful, but it's an aspiration we might want to have. But I think the idea of having regional harmonization is an important part. And I think there is clearly a plea to AFI to use the network that it has of regulators, of policymakers, to think about how you proactively create sort of approaches that regulators can take in terms of balancing the needs of stable financial systems with still allowing the markets to evolve so that regulation isn't just behind, catching up, but it is an active player in helping the market to develop. So with that, I'd just like to thank our very special guests here, and maybe we could all give them a round of applause. And thank you very much for your patience and listening as well. Thank you.